A tablet dug out of the desert south of Baghdad describes a substance stored deep inside the earth, not oil, not water. Something the scribe calls the ground breath, and the tablet is very clear about two things. The first is that this substance is what keeps the surface alive. The second is that we are taking it out, not slowly, not carefully. The tablet uses a word that translators fought over for 30 years, and the closest modern gloss is draining. We are draining what the earth needs. And near the bottom of the tablet, in a passage the first excavators refused to publish, the scribe describes what happens when the reservoir is finally empty. The signs before the ending, the order in which they arrive, and the number that comes after. However, the story does not begin with the reservoir. It begins with the man who translated it, and with the reason he stopped translating for the last 11 years of his life. His name was Hendrik Vasterling. He was a Dutch Assyriologist attached to the Leiden University collection from 1961 until his retirement, and he had a reputation for refusing to publish anything he was not personally sure of. In 1974, he was sent a photograph of a broken tablet held in the storage rooms of the Berlin State Museum. The tablet was catalogued as VAT 11642. It had been excavated in 1912 near Farah, the ancient Shurupak, and it had sat untranslated for 62 years because the surface was worn, the sign forms were archaic, and no one at Berlin had the time. Vasterling had the time. He had also, unusually for his generation, taught himself the older sign lists, the ones that ran back into the archaic period before standard cuneiform stabilized. He recognized the signs. He asked Berlin for a plaster cast, and in the winter of 1975 he began to read. The tablet, as Vasterling reconstructed it, was not a myth, it was a description. It was written in the voice of a scribe attached to the temple of Enki at Eridu, and it opened with a statement that read, in the standard translation Vasterling later published, as follows: "Below the earth is a reservoir. It is not water, it is not fire. It is the breath the ground gives when it is at rest. The reservoir was made when the world was made, and it cannot be made again." And this was the sentence that made Vasterling put the tablet down for 6 months before continuing. Because the next line, according to the transliteration he kept in his private notes, said something that no Sumerologist had ever seen a scribe say. It said, in Vasterling's rendering, "We are taking it. We are taking it faster than the earth can hold it. And the ones who watched us make the taking machines did not stop us." That last phrase is where the tablet turns from a description of geology into something else. The ones who watched. Vasterling spent 2 years working out who the scribe meant. The Sumerian word he used, which appears in other tablets from the same site, is normally translated as the elder brothers, or the ones who came before. In the context of Enki's temple, it almost certainly refers to the class of beings the later Akkadian and Babylonian texts would call the Anunnaki, and the tablet is unambiguous. It was not the Anunnaki who built the taking machines. It was human beings. But it was the Anunnaki who taught human beings how, and then, at some point the tablet does not fully explain, stopped watching, or were made to stop watching, or left. Quick pause, and this is something new. For the first time since the 12 codes, there is a second document. It is called the 7 Resets. Every time the world was erased, matched against the emptied reservoir under the crust, and the checklist of signs for the 8th. 4 are active. Linked below, QR on screen. Back to the video. Vasterling worked through the description column by column. The tablet is divided into what he called 5 bands, each one carrying a different aspect of the subject. The first band describes the reservoir itself, where it sits, what it is made of, and why the scribe insists it is not any of the substances the human world already knows. The reservoir, according to the tablet, sits below the deep water. This is important because Sumerian geography recognized several layers of water. There is the water on the surface, the rivers, and the sea. Beneath that is the water in the marshes. Deeper still is the water that comes up from below when you dig a well. And then, deeper than all of these, there is what the scribe calls the black water, which is not really water at all, but is the closest word the language had for a fluid that flowed without being wet. Below the black water, the reservoir begins. It is not a lake. It is not a pool. The tablet uses a word that means, in its plainest sense, a held breath. The reservoir is the earth holding its breath. And what it holds, the scribe says, is the substance every living thing on the surface needs in order to remain alive. Vasterling was cautious about the physics. He noted, in a footnote that appears in his 1979 monograph, that the scribe describes the substance in terms that do not correspond to any single modern material. It is warm at the point of emergence, but does not burn. It carries what the scribe calls the slow fire, which is not heat and not electricity, but is described as the thing that makes seeds sprout when the season turns. It rises through the soil in what the tablet calls thin threads, and it is drawn up by the roots of trees, by the breathing of small creatures underground, by the movement of water in the veins of the earth. Every living thing on the surface, according to the tablet, is drinking from the reservoir constantly. Not the water, the breath in the water, the slow fire in the ground. And when a living thing dies, whatever slow fire it has taken from the reservoir returns to the reservoir. This is the cycle the scribe describes. The reservoir gives, the surface uses, the surface dies, and the slow fire returns. Except, the tablet says, when the taking machines are running, because the taking machines do not return anything. They take, and they turn what they have taken into something else, and the something else is scattered where the reservoir cannot draw it back. The scribe is very specific about this. The reservoir, he writes, was full at the beginning. It has been leaking since the first taking, and it will empty when the last taking is done. The second band of the tablet describes the taking machines themselves. This is where the Vasterling translation became controversial, and this is why the Berlin Museum refused, in 1981, to grant him permission to publish the full text. The scribe describes three kinds of taking machine. The first, he says, is the digging tooth. It goes into the ground and pulls up what is under the ground. The second is the burning mouth. It takes what has been pulled up and turns it into moving air and moving fire. The third is the drinking well. It goes down through the black water and drinks directly from the reservoir. All three, the scribe says, were built by human hands. All three were built after human beings were taught, by the ones who came before, how to take. And all three are still running. Vasterling never wrote this in public, but in his private notebook, which was donated to the Leiden collection after his death in 2003, he identified the three taking machines in modern terms. The digging tooth, he wrote, was mining. The burning mouth was industrial combustion. The drinking well was deep aquifer extraction, or possibly, he added in a later marginal note, the extraction of what modern geologists call deep hydrocarbons. What matters, for the purposes of the tablet, is that the scribe is describing a process the scribe cannot possibly have seen. Human beings in the third millennium before the Common Era did not have industrial combustion. They did not have deep drilling. They had copper mines, and those were shallow, and those alone would not have qualified as taking machines in the sense the scribe means. The scribe is describing something that had not happened yet, in the language of something already remembered. And this is the point where Vasterling began to suspect that the tablet was not written about the scribe's own time. It was written about ours. The third band of the tablet is what Vasterling called, in his notes, the wrong reading, because it is the band he refused to translate publicly until 1988. This band describes the signs the surface shows when the reservoir begins to run low. Not empty, just low. And the scribe lists these signs in an order the Berlin readers found uncomfortable. The first sign, the scribe says, is that the seasons begin to move, not disappear, move. The times of planting and the times of harvest slide out of the places the calendar puts them. The rains come at the wrong month, and when they come too hard, and when they do not come, the ground cracks in a pattern the elders do not recognize. This is the first sign, and it is the sign the tablet says is the easiest to explain away. The scribe writes that when this sign appears, the people will say that the sky is only moody, and that the pattern will return next year. It will not return next year, the scribe writes. It will get worse. The second sign is that the ground itself begins to give up its dead. The tablet uses a phrase that Vasterling translated as, "the earth is spitting bones." He read this, in his 1988 paper, as a description of what modern people would call subsidence and sinkholes, places where the surface collapses because what was under it has been drained. The scribe says that this sign, when it appears, will appear first in the places where the taking machines have worked longest, and will spread outward from those places in rings. The rings, the scribe says, will meet, and when they meet, the third sign begins. The third sign is the one Vasterling would not discuss with journalists. The scribe writes that the animals will begin to walk in the wrong direction. Not migrate, not flee, walk. Herds and flocks and schools will move, all at once, without visible cause, toward places where there is no food and no water. They will die there. And the scribe says that when this begins, The people who watch it will not understand what they are seeing, because the animals themselves will not appear to be afraid. They will appear to be called. The reservoir, the tablet says, is what calls them home when it is time. And when the reservoir is low, it calls them home too early. Before we move on to the fourth sign, stop. What you just heard about the 3 signs only makes sense next to the 6 resets before it. Each one began the same way. Each one erased the record. It is all in the 7 resets linked below. Grab it, come back. QR is on your screen. The fourth sign is fire in the wrong places. The scribe describes it as fire that comes out of the ground where no wood grows, and fire that comes out of the water where no wood floats. Vasterling read this as a description of gas releases from thawing permafrost, from destabilized methane deposits, and from the seabed itself, though he was careful in the paper to say that these were possibilities and not equivalences. The scribe is more direct than Vasterling was. The scribe says that the fire in the wrong places is the slow fire escaping the reservoir. When the reservoir is intact, the slow fire moves upward through the roots of trees and the breath of animals. When the reservoir is cracked, the slow fire finds the cracks and comes out where it should not. The fifth sign is what the scribe calls the thinning of the shell. The shell, in Sumerian cosmology, is the outer surface of the earth, the layer between the reservoir and the sky. When the reservoir is full, the shell is held from below. When the reservoir is low, the shell begins to sag. And when the shell sags, the sky comes closer. The scribe describes the sign in terms a modern reader would call weather. Storms that reach higher than storms should reach. Air that carries water in quantities that should not be possible. Lightning that touches down in places where lightning does not normally strike. The tablet says that this sign, when it appears, will be blamed on the weather. The weather is not the cause. The weather is what the sagging shell allows. Vasterling noted, in a supplementary paper published in 1990, that the scribe treats the shell not as a metaphor but as a physical structure, something that has thickness, a form that can be measured, a skin that responds to pressure from below the way a drumhead responds to pressure from below. When the reservoir is full, the pressure holds the shell rigid, and the atmosphere behaves according to the patterns the shell allows. When the reservoir is emptying, the pressure drops, and the shell begins to flex. Flex in a shell of that scale, the scribe implies, is measured not in centimeters, but in the movement of air masses across whole continents. The tablet ends this passage with a phrase Vasterling translated as "a taut skin sings, a loose skin does not," meaning, in his reading, that the atmosphere had once had a stable tone, and had begun, in the scribe's own time, to lose it. The sixth sign is the one that no scribe before this tablet had described, and the one Vasterling checked against every parallel he could find. The sixth sign is that the memory begins to slip, not the memory of the elders, the memory of the whole people. The scribe writes that when the reservoir is nearly empty, the ones who live on the surface will begin to forget what they were told at the beginning. They will forget the names of the ones who came before. They will forget the pattern of the reservoir. They will forget that they are drinking from it. And when they are reminded, the scribe says, they will not believe it, because the reminder will feel like a story, a very old story, told badly, by someone who does not understand modern things. This is the sixth sign, and the tablet says this is the sign that arrives last, because this is the sign that guarantees the ending. If the surface has forgotten, the surface will not stop the taking. The seventh sign is the ending itself, and the scribe describes the ending in a passage that runs for 11 full lines on the tablet, uninterrupted, in a style Vasterling said was unlike anything else in the corpus. It reads like a witness account, not a prophecy. A memory of something the scribe had been shown. The reservoir goes silent first. The scribe says that for a period he does not name, but which reads like weeks, the surface will feel a stillness it has never felt before. The wind will drop. The tides will slow. The small creatures underground will stop moving. Everything that draws the slow fire will feel the slow fire not arriving, and everything that draws the slow fire will hold still, waiting. The scribe says that during this period the human beings on the surface will feel something they cannot name. He describes it as a weight behind the eyes, a pressure in the chest that is not fear and not sickness. It is, he says, the body noticing that the reservoir is empty. The body does not have language for this, but the body knows. Then the shell breaks. The scribe does not say the shell breaks in one place. He says it breaks in 7 places, and he names the places by direction and by star. 2 of the directions Vasterling was able to identify. One corresponds to the region of the North Atlantic between Iceland and the Faroe Islands. Another corresponds to a point in the western Pacific south of the Mariana Trench. The other 5, Vasterling wrote, could not be located with certainty from the astronomical references, because the star positions the scribe used no longer map cleanly onto the modern sky. The precession of the equinoxes has moved them. But he was able to say, with confidence, that the 7 breaking points are not distributed at random. They form a pattern, and the pattern, he wrote, matches the placement of what other Sumerian tablets describe as the 7 pillars of the earth. The reservoir, when it goes empty, cracks at the pillars. What comes out of the cracks, the scribe says, is not fire and not water. It is what was left in the reservoir at the end. He calls it the ash breath. He describes it as heavy and gray and slow and cold to the touch. And he says it does not rise into the sky the way smoke rises. It stays close to the ground. It moves across the surface in sheets. And where it moves, the scribe says, the surface does not recover. The slow fire that was in the trees, in the animals, in the water, in the soil itself, is drawn out and carried away by the ash breath. What is left is not dead in the way a body is dead. It is empty in the way a jar is empty. The reservoir, the scribe says, is drinking back what it can before it is finished. And what it takes from everything living. The scribe adds one detail here that Vasterling found difficult to render. He writes that the ash breath is not evil. It is not hunting. It is not choosing. It is only doing what the reservoir does when there is nothing left to hold back. The reservoir was a container. When the container is empty, whatever was still leaking from the outside is pulled inward, because the pressure inside is now lower than the pressure of the surface, and the surface itself begins to be drawn down into the empty space. This is what the ash breath is. It is the surface entering the reservoir the way water enters a broken jar. The order reverses. What was above goes below. What was below is gone. The 11 lines end with a sentence Vasterling put in italics in his 1988 paper. The surface does not end because the sky falls. The surface ends because the ground below the surface has been taken. And after this, the tablet is silent for 4 lines, and then resumes with what appears to be a note added later by a different hand, in a different sign form, which reads only, "This has happened before, and the ones who came before did not stop it, and we will not stop it." This is the passage that made Vasterling put the tablet aside for the second time, this time for 2 years. Because the note added by the second hand raises a question the tablet does not answer, and Vasterling could not stop turning it over. If this has happened before, when? If the ones who came before did not stop it, why? And if we will not stop it, what is the mechanism by which the reservoir refills, since the tablet is very clear that it cannot be refilled by any process human beings know? Vasterling wrote, in the private notebook, that he thought he had found the answer in a companion tablet held at the same museum, catalogued as VAT 11648, which had been excavated in the same season, and which appeared, from the sign forms, to have been written by the same scribe. The companion tablet is broken worse than the main one. Only the upper third survives, but the upper third describes in the same voice what the ones who came before did after the last emptying. They waited. The companion tablet says they waited a length of time the scribe measures in what Vasterling read as 36 great years, which in the Sumerian astronomical system is roughly 130,000 of our years. And after they waited, they came back. And they refilled the reservoir. The tablet does not say how, but it does say what they refilled it with. And the phrase the scribe uses, in Vasterling's translation, is the breath of the ones who were left. Not the ones who died in the emptying, the ones who survived. The ones who came before, according to the companion tablet, took the breath of the survivors, and they carried it back into the reservoir, and they used it to refill what had been drained. And when the reservoir was full, they seeded the surface again, and they left, and the surface began again, and did not remember. This, Vasterling wrote in the notebook, is why the 6th sign is the memory sign. It is a feature. It is not an accident that the surface forgets. It is the condition on which the refilling depends. If the surface remembered, the surface would not build the taking machines a second time, and the reservoir would not empty a second time, and the cycle would not close. Vasterling wrote, in the same notebook entry, that this was the passage that changed his understanding of the entire Sumerian corpus. He had spent his career reading the tablets as fragments of a lost mythology. After the companion, he wrote, he could no longer read them that way. They were not myths. They were the residue of a species that had gone through this before, that had almost written the memory down clearly, and that had been persuaded, by whoever holds the pen the next time around, that what they had written was only a story. Vasterling published his translation of the main tablet in 1988 in a small journal with a print run of less than 400 copies. He did not translate the note in the second hand. He did not publish the companion tablet at all. When asked, in a letter from a colleague at Chicago, why he had held back the companion, he wrote a reply that survives in the Leiden archive. The reply says only, "Because the companion tablet is not a warning. The main tablet is a warning. The companion tablet is an instruction, and I do not know who it is written for." He retired the following year. He lived in a small house north of Leiden and did not translate anything else for the last 11 years of his life. His wife, in a 2004 interview, said he stopped going out to the shore. He told her, once, that he did not like to look at the water anymore, because he could not stop thinking about what was under it. He died in the winter, 2003. The notebook was found on his desk, open to his final marginal note about the taking machines. The note read, "In Dutch, they are still running, all three of them. And now, there are more." What the tablet is describing, if we take the scribe at his word, is not a prediction about the far future. It is a description of a process that began the day the first industrial furnace was lit, and that has been accelerating ever since. The first sign, the moving seasons, is already here. The second sign, the earth spitting bones, is already here, in every subsidence report from every mining region. The third sign, the animals walking in the wrong direction, is already here, in every mass stranding of whales that has increased in frequency since the 1990s. The fourth sign, fire in the wrong places, is already here, in the methane releases from the Siberian tundra and in the seafloor gas flares that were not seen a generation ago. The fifth sign, the thinning of the shell, is arguable, and Vasterling was cautious about it, but it is not obviously absent. The sixth sign, the memory sign, is the one to watch, because if the scribe is right, the sixth sign is what makes the ending inevitable. It is the sign that closes the door on stopping. And the sixth sign is not measured in the sky or in the ground. It is measured in what people are willing to hear. It is measured in whether a warning, when it is presented, is read as a warning or read as a story. If you have listened to this and it has felt to you like a story, that itself is the sixth sign. Not because you are wrong, because the scribe predicted that this is what it would feel like when the reservoir is nearly empty. The tablet is in the Berlin State Museum, VAT 11642. The Vasterling translation was reprinted twice, in editions smaller than the first. The companion tablet, VAT 11648, has not been published. The notebook is in Leiden, and under the ground, the reservoir, according to the scribe, is doing what it has done every time this cycle has run before. It is emptying, slowly, then not slowly. Sleep well.